HeroX. Christian, welcome back. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Okay, today what we're going to discuss is, as I mentioned, the sequel to a previous episode, which was everything to do with artificial intelligence, technology, and how that's causing a certain level of technological unemployment. Now, that discussion was very focused around how this is happening. It's happening maybe at a slower rate than what is in everyone's mind. But what I want to do today is really dive into what that future of work is going to look like when the technological, when this displaces a bunch of work for us, and how we can best prepare for that future. So without any further ado, let's dive straight into it. So Christian, in the previous episode, you said that there was going to be a number of white collar jobs that are going to be displaced. And what I want to know is how is that, or how is this, when that displacement does happen, how is it going to affect work as it is currently being done today?
Okay, great. So, so first off, I'm not a scientist or an expert or have deeply researched this. So think of this as an opinion piece in terms of my opinion on it. But I do have strong opinions about it, and hopefully they're well-informed, strong opinions. So there's a lot of talk about technological unemployment. There's been a lot of talk about the income disparity between the working class and the middle class and the 1% and all that. There's a number of factors here that I think impacted. The first one is that throughout history, wealth creation has oscillated between asset owners and producers, right? So people who work produce things. Assets don't produce things, but assets can be utilized. So, if you think about the early days, it was all about producers. When we got into, I'll skip a bunch of historical pieces, got into feudalism, that was all asset owners, right? Because it was basically indentured servitude. And then we, skipping ahead, the post-World War II era, producers were highly favored. And so you could buy a house. The average house in the late 50s, early 60s was 3 times your income. So as you think of your income multiplied by 3, and then think that was the average price of a detached home with a white picket fence, right? Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I would say.
Compared to now, right? So now the pendulum has slowly swung as technology has taken over to asset owners. And so if you own assets, you have you have a superior, disproportionate advantage. And one of the side effects of the World War II phase was the modern HR and modern recruiting process, which gives too much power to companies. And so this whole job interviews is kind of begging for jobs and trying to get hired, and losing your job is like a devastating thing is weird. And is really because of the current power structure that exists, which people think is just like the way things are, but it's not the way things are. It's actually the way they've been designed and engineered, whether accidentally or on purpose. And it doesn't have to be that way. So we need to move into a world where the income producers are in a position to generate more wealth than they're currently generating. By the way, a lot of 1%ers or 1/10 of 1%ers know this, right? They've got more money than they'll ever need, and they're paying the least amount of tax, and their wealth is growing faster than almost any other wealth class, especially the 1/10 of 1%ers, and they know it's wrong. And they're trying to figure out a way to distribute it downwards. So that's a context for where we are now. Here's how we're going to solve it. So in the AI side of things, there's a lot of talk about technological unemployment, AI, how it's going to take the jobs away. And I think the AI thing's overblown. The AI is really good at repetitious work. Like if you talk about AI displacing white collar workers, AI is really good at repetitious, boring work, and not really good at the super creative work. So there's good news and bad news there. It is going to displace a lot of jobs, but most of the jobs are still in the category of crappy jobs.
Okay.
And there's still a tremendous opportunity for growing, growing the jobs. The key to it is the term I would call, and I think this is the future of employment in general, is what I would call hyper specialization. Great,
awesome. So that's great context and kind of a good prelude to my next question. So if that's hyper specialization is going to be, the thing that becomes really important. And as you said, like the rate at which this is happening in our head is probably exaggerated and probably due to a lot of media and whatnot. But then if that's going to happen, and it is going to happen, what can we do now? What can all of us do now to kind of prepare for that shift?
Yeah, so I'm not even sure hyper specialization is the right term. Okay. It probably is used in for a different meaning that I'm describing. So let me kind of define it a little bit. Sure. So hyper specialization is not about taking doctors and creating more specialists, right? Mm-hmm. Hyper specialization is, let's say, taking Desi, right? And Desi figuring out what her unique ability is, what your favorite kind of mode of production is, mm-hmm. right? And that that is really it really maps. So if people are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it really maps into and in fact, let me share some diagrams here.
Sure thing.
So it really maps to self-actualization. Okay.
Okay.
In that when people have their basic needs met, now they can really do what they love, and mm-hmm. doing what they love tends to correlate really well with what they're good at, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the key part to it. And let me use an analogy, right? So so let's say that somebody really loves drawing space monsters. Okay. Let's say that you just dig space monsters. You've watched, as a kid, you watched sci-fi, you love doodling, and you just got really good at drawing space monsters. Now, could you make a career where all you do is draw space monsters? That's a good question. Well, I think we live in a world now where you're pretty much connected to, you're 2 clicks away from pretty much everybody on the planet. So if you could imagine that there was a global marketplace, and that anybody who needed to draw a space monster could find you and could ask you to draw a space monster, and you got so good at it that you could charge a pretty good number, like maybe a space monster takes you 2 to 3 hours to draw, and you could charge $1,000. That's a pretty good return. But for the people that need the space monster, paying $1,000 for a really great space monster is probably a bargain, right? And so, think about it. So game developers, are authors, TV and movies, there's probably a number of categories I'm not even thinking of, could need a space monster. And so it's really about creating a personal brand. The analogy I would use is it's what social media has done with online communities, right? Which is your Facebook page and my Facebook page are completely different. We have a ton of freedom, on our Facebook pages or our Instagram feeds on what we do. One person might, only do, selfies, and every place they go, they're doing selfies, probably because they're massively insecure, right? Other people, it might be all about, the people they meet. Another person, it might be the books they're reading. Your Facebook page, you could have, everybody you've ever met could be on your Facebook page, or you could just have it right down to your really core friends. You get to choose. Technology lets you really personalize the way that you use it when it's done well. It empowers and it breathes humanity into us because we get to be more of ourselves rather than trying to fit in to, the kind of, let's say the mass economy, which is where we came from. So if you apply that to labor, now imagine that you can get really good at very specific things. And if we have a global labor market, you can find the people that need your specific skill set. You might be a business analyst, but what you're really good at is lead, applying for LEED certification. I don't know if you know what LEED is. LEED is like for buildings, it's how green a building is. LEED Platinum is like, yeah. So maybe you just geek out over that and you love it. And that's, you can do that like in your sleep. To most people that do LEED certifications now, do it as part of their regular day job, and it takes a lot of time for them to do it. But you can do it in a third the time, and your rate of return and your time versus the value is really high. So that's what I mean by hyper specialization.
Great, awesome, perfect. So with that in mind, how the hyper specialization, creating, you mentioned how having a global like marketplace to find basically, anything. Am I right? You can find anything on the global marketplace, and it sounds like we're moving into this era where that's really technology is really enabling that and allowing that to happen at a more a more regular and a very simpler way. So now, if we're going to look forward into the future, right? And that, in your opinion, is what it's going to look like. How is it that what tools are possible for us to not only prepare for said future, but also really optimize on it? And what are your views on that?
Well, so like anything, where the first fundamental limit is what's accessible in the marketplace, right? So we're still stuck with a job market, a labor market that, for the most part, works the same way it worked, I don't know, like in the 90s, right? There's been some tweaks, et cetera, but it kind of reminds me of like home rentals, like vacation rentals, before the internet. I'm old enough to remember before the internet, by the way. So it kind of reminds me of the vacation rentals, where you'd have newspapers and maybe some catalog, or I don't know. I didn't rent vacation homes back then. And then on the internet, the first kind of attempt at using the internet was just to put those listings online, but the basic experience was the same. And it wasn't until kind of Airbnb came along and really rethought the user experience that it really transformed. So HR, the labor markets are still kind of in this old paradigm on the internet, right? Or what I would call icing on a mud pie, right? And what happens is, fully realize the potential of the internet, where we're all connected, it's personalized, there's network effects and all that. We really need to rethink how companies find people that they want to pay to do work for them, also known as the labor market. And I think the internet is yet to really crack that open. And that's one of the key themes around HeroX is to really crack that open. The idea, for example, that I need a work permit issued by a country in order to do work in that country, like in the digital economy, it's ludicrous, right? In fact, many of the rules of employment in the digital economy are ludicrous. Having to commute to an office and so you can be supervised by your middle manager is ludicrous and I think demeaning. And don't even get me started about cubicle farms, okay, or performance reviews, or geez, like it's terrible. I think the millennials, the digital natives, as I like to call them, they intuitively feel that it's broken, They just don't know what the right answer is yet because it hasn't emerged. But there's some science. I'll need to find the stat for this. But millennials interview poorly compared to Gen Xers, for example. The millennials feel that the interview process is very foreign to them. And if you look at Glassdoor,
Last door.
yeah, where they're actually it's like Yelp for like HR, right? Or Yelp for like jobs, I guess, right? And there's reviews for job interviews, for bosses, for CEOs, for the office environment. You're starting to see the chinks in the armor, right? Where now companies are accountable for how they're doing it. That's actually causing some good dynamics where companies are now having to think about the user experience for recruiting, for example, because even for those that they don't hire, if they rate that company negatively in terms of their interview process, it's going to hurt them. In the past, that never happened. But we're already starting to see those chinks in the armor. But the fundamental first step is, we need to create a global, liquid, digital economy that connects everybody together and breaks free of the paradigm of the old labor market. And there's a number of elements of what that looks like that I could talk about in another question or another time.
Yeah, great. And you best know that I will be following up with you for those examples. Christian, that is time for us. So thank you as always. There's always so many incredible insights that I get from chatting to you about pretty much everything. So thank you so much for that. I'll definitely will be again.
I have one more thing to say.
Oh, sure thing. Let's go.
Yeah. Shit, poo, fart, Negro Chinese people. I'm just saying that so we can't use the recording.
Why?
Yeah. There you go. Now you can't use the recording.
Well, we can cut it out though.
Oh, damn it. Well, next time I'm just going to Tourette's it. I'm just going to be like, that's a very good good question. Fuck, Desi.
Okay, so let's try to thank you once again. Thank you, Christian, for taking this time to chat with me. We'll be following up once again with all those other questions that I would definitely always walk away with when I hear your insights. But thank you for taking the time to talk, and we'll chat to you soon. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you.